Hey everybody, Matt Johnston here. I am back with another COVID-19 legal update. Been talking in the past couple of videos, and in this video about the Department of Labor's regulations regarding paid sick leave and the expanded FMLA. This particular video we're going to be talking about money and how much you have to pay and how do you calculate that pay. For full-time employees, not so hard. For part-time employees, yeah, you're probably going to need an abacus, a slide rule, and probably a math major to help you. So we'll walk through that in a little bit. Just a quick caveat, we are dealing with a little bit more specifics than the generalities I've often talked about. So just a reminder, I am a lawyer, but I am not necessarily your lawyer. So if you're not a current lawyer, we do offer, or I'm sorry, if you're not a current client, we do offer pay-as-you-can consultations. You can schedule those consultations by using the link that's down below there in the notes. If you're a client and you need some help with implementing these things, please give us a call and we will walk through the specifics of your particular situation. In the meantime, let's talk about the money. So how do you go about calculating the pay that a particular employee is going to receive? So let's talk first about paid sick leave. If an employee is eligible for paid sick leave, they are eligible to be paid at their normal rate of pay, provided that normal rate of pay is at least equal to the prevailing minimum wage. So not just federal minimum wage. If your state has a higher minimum wage or a locality has a higher minimum wage, you have to pay that. And if they're a full-time employee, meaning they work 40 hours or more per week, then that particular employee is entitled to 80 hours of paid sick leave. Now, if you are a part-time employee, things get a little bit more complicated. So here's what the Department of Labor was looking at. Some part-time employees have a particularly fixed schedule. For example, they work Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 a.m. to say 2 p.m. All right, so they're working a very specific, very fixed schedule, but they're not working 40 hours a week. The calculation there would appear to be fairly simple. But you may also have part-time employees who work on a different schedule. So the schedule may vary from week to week. And the FFCRA came up with something that wasn't entirely in line with the Fair Labor Standards Act. So the Department of Labor had to come up with some sort of mechanism. And these particular pages of the regulations, yeah, they're a little hard to read, not gonna lie. And it took me a couple of times to get through them myself to sort of figure things out. But essentially what it boils down to is that the Department of Labor and their interpretation of what Congress intended to mean was that you need to figure out what a person's average daily work amount was, the number of hours they work on an average day. And if the employee has been with the employer for a while, that's over a 6-month period. If it's less than a 6-month period, then it's what they agree to or what had been promised. So if an employer had promised, yeah, you're going to work 20 hours a week, that's how those sorts of things work. So you figure out what the average day is, and then you multiply that by 14. So let's say the average day for a person is 2.5 hours. Spread out, that's how many hours a day they've worked for the past 6 months. You multiply that 2.5 hours times 14 and you end up with the number 21. And that would be the number of hours of sick leave that a part-time employee would be eligible for. To say this is a bit of a mathematical headache would be an understatement of monumental proportions. But that's how the FFCRA has worked it. So if you have part-time employees, really, you need to work with your payroll company and you need to work with perhaps your accountant and certainly your attorney to make sure that you are complying with this and figuring out what a part-time employee is eligible for in terms of the number of hours of pay that they are entitled to receive. So that's the fun stuff. The next part is, of course, the monetary thing. So if you have a person who is receiving paid sick leave for reasons numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 under the statute, so that is somebody who is under a quarantine or isolation order, under a self-quarantine order for the purposes of advice from a healthcare provider. They are actively seeking and taking affirmative steps to obtain a diagnosis or have symptoms of COVID-19, or they are caring for an individual who has either a self-isolation order or been required to self-isolate by a medical professional. So a government order and a professional order. So those are, if it's those first 4 reasons, then the person is paid their full pay up to a limit of $511 per day. Okay, so if they are taking the time and they're eligible, they're otherwise eligible, and you should see our video on eligibility and how that's defined, and they are receiving the pay, then they get the lesser of their full day's pay, okay, or the amount of pay that they are eligible to receive, okay, or $511 per day. So that's the cap. So for the 2-week period, it would be $5,110 would be the maximum payout to an employee, but they would receive their pay. Okay. If the reason an employee is taking paid sick leave is for reason number 5 under the statute, and that is an employee needs to take paid sick leave in order to care for a son or daughter whose school or child care facility has been closed for COVID-19 related reasons, then that person would be eligible to receive up to 2/3 of their normal pay, or a cap of $200 per day. So over that 2-week period, that would be $2,000. But that's only for reason number 5. So that is for your paid sick leave. Now, the calculation of pay for expanded FMLA, okay, that is available for employees who need the time off to care for a son or daughter because the school or child care facility that their school normally attends has been closed for a COVID-19 related reason. I know that's a lot of language, but we sort of have to get used to that language. Then that employee, expanded FMLA, is limited to 12 total weeks. Okay, that's it, 12. And those 12 weeks normally would include the first 2 weeks would not be paid, but the statute allows for an employee to take the first 2 weeks as paid at their 2/3 level and the next 10 weeks, so they can substitute that leave so that they can still continue to have income. So one of the important notes of that is that the expanded FMLA is 2/3 of the employee's normal rate of pay, or a maximum of $200 per day. Now, I talked about exemptions in a previous in a previous video where we were talking about the small business exemption, and those exemptions still apply to businesses with fewer than 50 employees. So bear that in mind as well. Now, the expanded FMLA, like I said, it's capped at $200 per day and is 10 weeks. Now, an employer can require an employee to concurrently use their paid time off under the employee's policy, or paid time off that's available under state law. So for example, the state of Maryland has a paid sick leave law that requires employers to provide certain kinds of leave benefits. So an employer can request or require that an employee use that leave concurrently with their expanded FMLA. So keep those things in mind. Okay. So I want to read specifically what the regulation says. And I'm sorry, I got to scroll down here. Okay, here we go. As I was saying, the employer can require, the employee may opt to, or may choose to use the leave concurrently, or the employer can require the use of paid time off policies. Now, I want to be careful here. The federal paid sick leave benefit is in addition to and over and above other state law or employer provided paid time off things. While an employer can say for the expanded FMLA that an employee use their employer provided PTO, that can only occur in the last 10 weeks of the EFMLA period. It cannot be applied to the first 2 weeks. That's where the employee gets their paid sick leave time. So I know that's a kind of a complicated situation, and I know there's a lot of interaction that's involved there, and I understand that that can be confusing, so please consult with counsel. As always, you can call and schedule an appointment with us, and we will be happy to discuss what you need to do under this law. It's not designed to be a punitive law. There is the small business exemption, but you do need to pay attention. Okay? In the meantime, keep washing your hands, keep practicing a little social distance, keep your chin up. We're going to get through this, I promise you. And I think we're going to come out the other side with a very sort of interesting world. And I'm looking forward to it. In the meantime, take care. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.